Hi, I'm Paul Guppy. I'm Vice President for the Washington Policy Center, and this is our regular update about the activities that we are doing, but also the important issues that are being dealt with by the leaders in Washington State. And of course, the big news this week is that the legislative session just got started down in Olympia. So we are in an off year, or I'm sorry, we are in an even year election year, and that means that the legislature will be in a short session, and in off years they are in a longer session. And the idea there, because the state is on a 2-year budget cycle, the theory is that in calm and relaxed off-year cycles, when the voters are not paying attention so much, then lawmakers can really get down to work and do a great job of making decisions for our state. And they do that in odd numbered years. And then the idea is that in even numbered years, which are political election years, and boy, they're controversial and the public is watching, and it's hard to make tough decisions in government, then they only need to make little adjustments in the existing 2-year budget. That's a great theory. What actually happens in practice is we essentially have an annual budget cycle. It doesn't matter whether it's an odd numbered year or even numbered year. The majority in Olympia pretty much does whatever they like. The good news for democracy is it is true that in election year, people tend to pay more attention. 2024 is a huge election year. And so that process is getting going right now in the state capitol. They have a 60-day session. It started on January 8th. It will end on March, I wrote it down here, and in March 7th. And their job is to make any adjustments that they need to make to the current budget. Well, there is a huge adjustment coming because money is pouring into the state treasury. Every fiscal estimate adds hundreds of millions of dollars to what lawmakers thought that they had when they first wrote the budget. And on top of that, the carbon tax that Governor Inslee signed a while ago is bringing in about $1.8 billion just this year in brand new taxes that many lawmakers are anxious to spend. So that is the number one item that they will be dealing with in Olympia, is making adjustments, as I said, which means increasing spending. Our point of view, of course, is that they could provide tax relief, and we have a number of proposals to do that. But the majority of the Democrats have pretty much signaled that they plan to spend all of this money. That will bring the state 2-year budget to a little over $70 billion, which is the highest state budget in history. If you ever hear some politician complaining about program cuts and reductions in social programs or suffering, that is almost certainly not true. The state has plenty of money, and the biggest problem they seem to have is how can they spend it fast enough before people notice that they have such a large surplus. So that's the top issue that's happening. There is a bill that has been introduced because the carbon tax has had such a massive effect on the economy. It affects inflation and affordability. It goes into the cost of energy. Here today and this weekend, Western Washington, that is going through one of the coldest periods it's had all year long. So home heating bills are going to be going up. The price of gas has gone up, and all of this is because of the carbon tax that Jay Inslee signed a little while ago. There is one bill, HB 2040, which would provide a rebate of $180 for every registered driver in the state. That's 6.8 million people. That's great. We would be happy if that bill passed because it provides some tax relief, but it would not get at the core problem of how the Climate Commitment Act, it's called, has added to the cost of virtually everything in the state. There is a proposal to repeal it, and I'll get to that in just a minute. The next issue that they're working on is trying to fix the ferry system on Puget Sound. Washington State runs the largest public ferry system in the country. Right now, they have about 17 boats operating. That is not nearly enough. They're about 3 to 4 boats short. You ask, well, shipbuilding is a pretty common industry. Why don't they just order more ferries? And the answer is they have put all kinds of restrictions on how Washington State can purchase ferries. It's not like a private shipping company that can just go out and buy whatever they like. And one of those restrictions was imposed by Governor Inslee in 2018 when, again, as part of his climate change agenda, he signed an executive order that requires any new ferry boats operating on Puget Sound to be hybrid electric ferries. So these are larger, heavier, more expensive, more complicated. And that has really driven up the price of buying a new ferry for the state. Ferries also have to be built inside Washington state, and there are only a limited number of shipyards that can do that. When the price estimates came in, it actually canceled. They were so high, more than $100 million per ferry, more than they expected. They were so high that the state canceled the contracting process and went back to square one. They did pass a bill last year that streamlined the contracting process. We think that's a good idea. That has helped. We were expecting that there would be bids to build new ferries coming in the middle or late in 2023, what are called RFPs, or requests for proposals. That did not happen, and now the Transportation Department is saying that they expect RFPs to come in sometime in the spring or middle of 2024. What our analyst, Charles Prestrud, noticed about that immediately was that that timing means that the legislature will already have adjourned when the state gets the next price estimate of what new hybrid electric ferries would cost. And at that point, the legislature will not be in a position to provide more funding or make adjustments as necessary. So we'll see what happens with that process. In the meantime, we can expect another summer of delayed sailings, cutbacks on schedules, and just the inability of people to move around Puget Sound. As someone who grew up in Seattle, culturally, we were always told by our leaders that the ferry system is part of the highway system. It's essential for mobility. Don't worry about the waterways that we have because, boy, the state is right on top of it and the ferries are just great. That has not been the situation for a number of years, and it doesn't look like they're going to be able to get out of that for some time because of the restrictions that I described earlier. So we'll see what happens there. Back to the part where I mentioned about repealing the carbon tax. That is one of 6 initiatives to the people that have been introduced in this legislative session. A little bit of background. Most people didn't really notice through the last part of last year, actually for most of last year, there was a massive popular signature collection campaign going on for 6 people's initiatives to the legislature. And Washington State is one of the few Western states where people can actually submit. It's like the public has submitted a bill to the legislature. Those initiatives would require 325,000 valid signatures to be qualified and then submitted to the legislature. All of these 6 initiatives received more than 420,000 signatures. The Secretary of State has already notified lawmakers that these signatures will almost certainly be enough for all 6 of these proposals to be considered in the current legislative session. 2 factors are interesting about that. One is because we follow the policy process very closely, and politics is kind of an art. We noticed that majority Democrats and the governor were taken completely by surprise by this signature effort, which had been going on through most of last year. And to us, this is a good indication of how, folks on the left tend not to pay attention to a diversity of opinions that are out across the state. These initiatives turned out to be very popular. They had no problem collecting the signatures and a wide margin. And yet it wasn't until early December that again, Democrats and activists on the left tended to notice, like, wow, where did these popular initiatives come from? They were submitted to the Secretary of the State on December 29th. And the Secretary of State, is, as I mentioned, is in the course of certifying the signatures. In the next 10 or 20 days, those will come before the legislature. And that's the second thing that's interesting about this process is lawmakers in Olympia have no option but to consider these initiatives. Most bills, the leadership can filter out. We don't like that proposal. There was a sales tax bill, bipartisan. They just tabled it. But with these initiatives, they can't do that. The Democrats have to, and they have 3 choices. They can either just pass the initiative straight up and it becomes law. They can do nothing, in which case the initiative will automatically appear on the November ballot later this year. Or the third option is lawmakers can pass an alternative, which will appear with the original initiative on the ballot in November, and then voters choose between them. Voters can defeat both or pick one or the other. So that's the process. It really has thrown a monkey wrench into what the Democrats had planned this session to do. We still have not heard what their plan is in response. We strongly suspect that they don't have a plan and that they're going to deal with each of these issues as they come up. So what are the 6 initiatives? I'll run through them very briefly. The first one is to repeal the capital gains income tax. The second one would impose a income tax ban on local governments. Counties and cities could not pass their own income tax. The third one would make the long-term care payroll tax optional. Currently, that's a very unpopular program that's mandatory for every payroll worker in the state. This proposal would not necessarily cancel the program, it would just allow people to opt out. When this was first proposed, there was an opt-out window for a while, and over 500,000 people opted out. So much so that the legislature shut that off, and this initiative would bring that back. The fourth initiative would once again authorize the police to pursue criminals. Currently, infamously, Washington State passed this kind of defund the police bill that tells the police that they cannot chase criminals except in very narrow circumstances. This bill would allow police to again pursue criminals in a vehicle if they believe that public safety is at risk and they have a reasonable suspicion that a crime has occurred, which is a common sense standard. The fifth one is, as I mentioned before, to repeal the carbon tax, and this one is simple. We read the text of every initiative, and this one is about 1 page long. It simply says that we go back to where we were about 2 years ago when there was no carbon tax. And then the sixth one has to do with parental rights. It would require school districts to notify parents about what the content of the curriculum is in the classroom. This is a sad commentary on public education because it indicates that the public no longer trust what teachers and school districts are teaching in the classroom. This was revealed during the COVID shutdowns when students were at home pursuing classes online. And for many parents, it was the first time they were actually able to see what teachers were presenting in class, and parents didn't like a lot of it. A lot of it is very controversial. In fact, not age appropriate for children. This initiative would give parents the right to know what's being taught in the schools. So those initiatives are coming up. There's several dozen other bills that we're tracking. I won't go into all of them. I'll mention 2 that I think are kind of interesting. One is a proposal to ban the outdoor use of all gasoline-powered engines of less than 25 horsepower. Essentially, that means all lawn maintenance, gardening equipment, air compressors, any kind of appliance that you might use outdoors that has a 25 horse engine, 25 horsepower engine or less, would be banned in the state. If that bill passes, it goes into effect in less than a year, so that would have a big impact. It also fits with the governor and the Democrats' proposal that they've already put in place to ban gasoline-powered cars in our state by the year 2035. So it's one more direction for that policy. And then the other issue that we think is interesting is a proposal to make every public school student on welfare, and that's through adding them automatically to the free lunch program. Again, no opt-out, no asking parents. Every student would be signed up for that. Having been a public school parent myself, I assume that there would technically be some way to get out of it, but you can imagine how it would change the character in the school where every child is on welfare, every child gets a free lunch. The other part of it that we don't like is that it appears to be intended to once again divide parents from their children, because the school district is basically saying to the parents, we don't trust you to provide for the nutrition of your child during the day. Therefore, we, the government, are going to take care of it. We think that's even more divisive than a lot of the controversy that we have right now. So those are some of the issues that we're following. A quick note about scheduling. We always have events coming up. Our next On the Go presentation is on January 16th, next week, and that provides a live online update about the issues that we're working on in the legislature. After that, our Young Professionals program has yet another fun social event that they have planned in Redmond on February 8th. And then looking forward to the spring, we have our events in the desert where we invite prominent national speakers to come and speak to our supporters at 2 events in Palm Springs. That's on March 9th. And then in Scottsdale, Arizona, we have an event on March 16th. And those are always a lot of fun, very social. Our staff is there. I will be there. It's a great chance to meet our supporters and, of course, have some great speakers. Washington Policy Center events tend to sell out. So anyone who's watching this who's interested in those Palm Springs events or the events in the desert in particular, might want to look into attending. And with that, I will be back next week with a new update. And thank you very much for watching.